Okay, we're still in Perek Ches. The main miktzaya in Perek Ches was about the different inyanim of learning Torah Lishma and not Lishma, but now he goes on to other things, and we're actually up to, it's a long Perek, so we're up to Sif Yud Tes. Perek Ches, Sif Yud Tes. I think we began it, but we'll start a little back. Macha Amru Chazal, right? Chazal say, Maseches Brachos, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu nosein chachma, ela mi sheyesh lo chachma. Hashem gives wisdom only to somebody who already has wisdom. So if you remember the pshat we talked about at the very end, and that is you have to be mishtadel to make yourself a vessel, to make yourself a kli that is able to be makabel HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashpah. Like anything else, if I have a bottle of water, the water will be collected only in a vessel. If I simply pour the water and there's no kli, there's no vessel, the water doesn't accumulate. So the concept is that obviously the Torah is the chachma of Hashem, but you have to be mishtadel on your own to do as much as you can to have chachma, and then Hashem gives you more, which means that the idea here is that the actual chachma you achieve is not from you. You have to do, I'm making up a number. You do 1% is your hatzlacha, and then 99% is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But without the 1%, you would get nothing at all. So Hashem gives a person chachma only if he was miyageya to give himself chachma.
Is there a source for that, like Afa Chodim or Adam Das, from that bracha implies that Hashem is giving Das also in understanding?
Well, that could be one source, but Lamaisa, the Gemara quotes a pasuk, the Gemara itself. The Gemara quotes a pasuk, the Gemara doesn't mention it here, but that chachma, it says, it's a pasuk in Daniel, no saying chachma l'chachamim. Now again, in Pshuto Shel Mikra, it just means anyone that is a chacham got it from God. But the drasha is he gives chachma only to somebody that is a chacham. And the reason is, as we said, bracha el yaina eino sheira al davar reikan. The brachos that come from above do not rest on something empty. Unless there's a kli to be makabel, it can't contain it. Hatam yadua. And the reason is obvious, although it's more of a Kabbalistic explanation. Ki mipnei dakusa eina yachayla lishreis alolam hazeh. So this is an interesting point. The truth of the matter is, Torah should not be accessible at all. Torah comes from the highest nature of God. How could Torah be accessible in Olam Hazeh, which is Gashmios and Hester Panim? Dakusa, the subtlety, the spirituality of Torah is actually beyond human comprehension. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I make myself a vessel, I'm able to be makabelit. And therefore, you need something that is subtle and spiritual. And that is why the more you purify yourself, the more you make yourself a ruchnius rather than a gashmius, that's what it means to make yourself a clay, the more you will be able to absorb the Torah, because the ruchnius has a difficulty connecting to physicality. But the way it can connect is I become an intermediary by making myself, and obviously a human being is gashmius by definition. I mean, there is a gashmi part of me. But the more I strengthen my ruchnius, the more I could receive the Torah. The Torah can connect to the ruchnius, and then I can bring it down into the earth. So again, I'm going to digress a little bit. Well, I'm not sure. I want to say it for Joshua Friday night. So maybe I won't say it now. But okay, it's a beautiful Beis Halevi in this. But okay, I'll save it. Okay. So this is the idea that you have to be mezachich. This is interesting, because the Gra seems to be adding a nekuda beyond what I said. The way I was explaining it is, you have to be miyageya to have chachma, and then you're makabel, more chachma from Hashem. But the Gra is adding the nekuda that it's not just a question of working and learning, it's a question of being mizachech, Yaiser, mizachech, to purify, to cleanse. So this is not only learning, this refers to midos, this refers to yiras shamayim, this refers to distancing yourself from excessive gashmias in the world. All of these processes in which you try to become more of a ruchnius person instead of a gashmias person. Now again, there is a klal gadol here that you have to, and the Gra himself talked about that in the earlier prakim. You have to know your madrega. If you try to jump to a madrega that's beyond you, so let's say you would say, for example, I want to become ruchniya, so I'm going to fast every Monday and Thursday. And indeed, there were people. I mean, the Arabs fast Ramadan. It hardly is masak in their midos. It's not really working that way. But there was a minhag among Yidden, some Yidden, very few, that they fasted the whole week. I mean, meaning literally, they only ate at night, meaning they would not eat anything from morning to night. Again, that was never common, but there was such an inyan. Other people, a little bit more, fasted Monday and Thursday, every Monday and Thursday. Other people only fasted Monday, Thursday, Monday of Bahav, meaning there were extra fast days added to the calendar, sometimes only a few and sometimes many, whole things. And yet, the Gra writes, if a person through accepting on themselves these types of chumras is going to be anxious, is going to be nervous, is going to get angry, is not going to be able to concentrate in davening, will not be able to concentrate in learning, it makes no sense to accept those types of chumras, because Lamaisa, your Avodas Hashem is going to be worse rather than better. What's the point of going beyond the halacha if you're not going to achieve any particular goal? And the opposite, it's going to be the opposite. In fact, Rabbi Yashiv even held, it says Rabbi Yashiv would boast, he was a funny type of boast, but he would say he had never stayed up Shavuos night to learn. Never. His minhag was, he went to sleep Shavuos night. Why is that? Because he made a cheshbon that he actually learned more if he didn't, because Rabbi Yashiv anyway had a schedule, you know this, I mentioned it before, you probably know it anyway, that because people were coming to him the entire day, he often didn't have, unbroken hours of learning. So his unbroken hours were from 2 a.m. to around 7. Once in a while somebody had the chutzpah, because they knew he was up, so they would call him at 3, but they understood this was private time. That was the idea. So as a result, he had a very disciplined seder. Like he would go to sleep at 9:30. Even then, he wasn't sleeping a lot, but he would sleep, let's say, from 9:30 or 9 o'clock to 1:30, something like that. And that was his seder. He went to sleep very, very, pretty early. He got up very early. So he made a cheshbon that if he starts fooling around with staying up all night and he disturbs his sleep cycle, he won't be able to have the same kaviyas. He'll be out of whack, like we are, even younger people. We can get out of whack for a few days, etc. So he actually held, it was more important to keep your kaviyas. This is an amazing thing because staying up all night Shavuos is a very, very makubal dikamin. It dates from the time of the Beis Yosef. The Shalah recounts how Rav Yosef Karo and the Alshich, they were sitting together Shavuos night, and the Shekhinah began to speak from Rav Yosef Karo's throat, saying what a gavaldige thing it was. And that's actually the makor of the minhag. In other words, it wasn't widely practiced except among the Mekubalim, but the Shalah HaKadosh publicized the story of the Beis Yosef, and that is how the minhag became nispashet. So we're talking about the 1600s. That's how it got nispashet throughout Europe, that you stay up all night the first night of Shavuos, or in Eretz Yisrael, the night of Shavuos. But Rabbi Yashiv held that ultimately you have to weigh everything, not only in terms of what you're doing, but in terms of what it'll cause you not to do. And sometimes this is what is called Yatsa Secharei Behefsedei. The reward gets canceled out by the detriment. By the way, an interesting thing, I once saw an article, it's a scholarly article, but it's really so cute, that this professor was trying to trace how the minhag of learning Shavuos night spread, which countries, etc., and he correlated it with the introduction of coffee from North America or South America. I mean, it's around Columbus, right? So he said, you see that the minhag of staying up all night tended to be adopted in the societies that had coffee. Meaning, if coffee didn't get to your country till 1600, you don't find the minhag of staying up all night until 1600. Very, very fascinating. I think Nikarim Divrei Emes, there may be a point to that particular thing. But the Iker point to make here is that the Gra himself warned us many times that a person should not jump to a madrega that they're not yet ready for, because what's going to happen is not only will they not achieve the high madrega, but chas v'shalom, they may lose the madregos that they have, right? If the only problem would be, I'm not going to achieve it, all right, so I could tell you now, let me try, all right, I'll try. If I make it, I make it. If I don't make it, I'm where I was. I mean, then I would say, do it, what are you losing? But for Keret, the Gra says, it's not just you won't make it. It's you'll lose what you have. At that point, you got to make a cheshbon. So on one hand, you have to be very, very careful. If somebody's going to tell me they want to just eat, one kazayas of bread a day, or they only want to sleep an hour a day or a half an hour a day or something like that, we would discourage it very much. Me'idach Gisa, the Gra does say that ultimately, to reach the highest levels of ruchnius, there has to be a certain purification of a person in which they try to disengage from materialism to some degree, but not at the risk of endangering your health or the like. So the Gra is learning a little different, or he's adding something. When it says HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives chachma only to a person who has chachma, it doesn't just refer to the yagiyah of learning Torah, but chachma refers to the whole process of spiritual purification. Chachma is a broader term. And therefore the Gra is saying, because Torah, which is kulo ruchni, cannot be mizdabek in Gashmias, except through an emtsoi of a ruchnius conduit. And therefore, I make myself more of a ruchnius conduit. I'm able to bring the Torah into the world through the ruchnius part of me. And that's the idea that without the zichuch, the Torah is not going to stick. Now, you may ask me a question. Well, what does that mean realistically? Torah is not going to stick. I mean, what do we even mean to say, how can you understand Torah? It is above, human comprehension. Well, is it? I mean, I open up a page of Gemara. So it discusses issues of what do you do when people argue over a talis, or what do you do when people argue over real property. I mean, this is stuff that you learn in law school, a different legal system, so to speak. You can be, non-religious and learn Gemara. You could be a goy and learn Gemara with the art scroll or whatever it would be. In other words, what does it mean to say it's not shayach to understand Torah if you're a Megushim? So the short answer is that when the Gra talks about understanding Torah, he also means something else. The informational component of Torah is certainly accessible. A bright person could understand what the Gemara is talking about. But the idea that Torah transforms you, that Torah elevates you, requires a certain zichuch on your part, meaning you got to meet God, not halfway, but you got to meet God 5% of the way. Meaning I got to make myself a kli for the Torah to elevate me. The Torah will elevate me, but only if I start trying to elevate myself. Okay, so it's not so much when we say this idea that Rav Chaim Volozhner builds on a lot, that the Torah is not shayach to be understood by a human being. We don't mean the information. I mean, information is information. I mean, it may be deep, but it's not like impossible. So they say it's not rocket science, although probably it's at least rocket science. That much it is. But we mean the chachma of Torah is the spiritual devekus to Hashem that the Torah gives you. So it has to start with a certain hishtadlus on your part. And he brings the pasuk. I said he didn't bring it. He brings the pasuk in Sefer Daniel, Yahev chachmasa lechakimin. This is what Daniel says. Hashem gives wisdom to a chacham. V'zeh she'amru, and that which Chazal say, Reikan, an empty vessel, cannot hold anything, meaning if it doesn't have a kli. Ratzalomar, she'Hashem yisbarach yadei psucha lashpia lakol. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to be mashpia on everybody, not just in Gashmias. Not just in Gashmias, in Ruchnias. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give you Ruchnias and Devekas. But if you're not mishtadel on your own, you're not able to be makabel that, because you're like, there's no kli. There's no vessel to be makabel. And that is the meaning of what we say in Kriya Shema. V'haya im shamoa tishma. Right? As you tishmu, but tishma or tishmu, it says in Kriya Shema. So what's the taich, the drasha? Im shamoa. Shamoa is past. If you were mishtadel to understand the Torah, Hashem then says, Tishmu, you will be Zaycha to greater understanding. Im Shamoa, if you have tried to understand, Tishma'u, you will understand. Okay, so that's the idea of Hashem gives Chachma only to me, Sheyesh Loi Chachma.
Can a person have the Torah if he doesn't have all 48 things that are necessary for Kenyan Torah? He just have a portion of Torah?
He'll have a portion. He'll have a portion of the Torah. You know, the Gra says a beautiful thing. The Gra says, just to digress for a moment, Friday night, this is not quoted here, interestingly enough, but Friday night we say Eishes Chayil. And Eishes Chayil has many, it's the last parak of Mishlei. Parak Lamed Aleph of Mishlei is Eishes Chayil. It was actually written, Shlomo HaMelech wrote it as a song of praise to his mother, Bathsheba. He wasn't describing his wives. He didn't have such mazel with most of his wives. But his mother was the Eishes Chayil. And in Pshuto Shel Mikra, it's a praise for a Jewish wife and mother. And indeed, Friday night, when the house is ready for Shabbos, it's Roy V'Nachan that a husband express appreciation for a wife. Meaning, those are legitimate pshatim. One shouldn't forget about Hakaras HaTayv to your wife. Right? We have getting married next week. Remember, Hakaras HaTayv to your wife. A big yesod. However, Al Pi Kabbalah, there are deeper interpretations. That the Torah is called your wife. You're the husband. And the Torah is called Eishes Chayil. And all of the things that the wife does for the husband is allegorically understood as the Torah elevating you. So the Gra says a wonderful thing. Chayil is Bigematria 48. Chayil. Ches, Yud, 18, Lam. So Eishes Chayil. The Torah is your wife. But for the Torah to be your wife, you have to have the 48 ways of being Kaina Torah. You see, it's a good thing. That, meaning, there are different levels of relationship you have with the Torah. Everybody can have some relationship with the Torah. But for the Torah to be your wife, the closest thing to you, it has to be Chayil. It has to be 48 ways. So you're correct. Without the 48 ways, we have a Shaykhus to Torah, but it's not the same as the Torah being your wife. In fact, what does he say at the end? He says, Rabos Bonos Osu Chayil Viat Olis Al Kulana. So he says like this, many people together may have the 48, meaning some people have this one, some people have this one. But the great Talmid Chacham is Olis Al Kulana, is above them all, because he has all 48, meaning At Olis Al Kulana. Whoever he's talking to, but the ideal Talmid Chacham, that is the, well, actually, I'm trying to figure it. It doesn't fit really, because in the imagery, the Torah is the wife and the Talmid Chacham is the man. So I'm trying to say, Rabos Banos, there it seems to switch a little bit. There it seems to look at the Torah as the husband and the Talmid Chacham as the Isha. So that's a little bit of a tzorachiyim. There are psukim that switch it around in that way. Meaning many Talmidei Chachamim have some of the 48. Rabos Banos have Chayil together, but the Gadol, the true tzaddik, has all four. Olis Al Kulana is above them all because they has all 48 ways. Although they tell you like this, at the Chazon Ish's Levaya. It's also a cute story. It shows you how tough the Brisker Rav was. Somebody gave a hesped that said, the Chazon Ish became the Chazon Ish because he learned Torah with all of the 48 ways that Chazal say is kind of Torah. And that's why he became the Chazon Ish. That's certainly a true statement. Good hesped. What could be wrong? But the Brisker Rav, who had a very critical eye, said he didn't like it. Because he said, that's like kind of making an excuse for yourself. Kind of saying, I'm not the Chazon Ish because I wasn't Zeicha to learning Torah Lishma. The Brisker Rav says, you're not the Chazon Ish because you didn't spend the time learning that the Chazon Ish. Now, your mashma, yeah, I learned as much as the Chazon Ish, but because I'm not, holding by the highest madregas. All right, so what do you expect? The person says, okay, I have to hold by the highest madregas. The Brisker Rav says, you're not the Chazon Ish, not because you didn't learn Lishma. You're not the Chazon Ish because you didn't learn. I mean, it's not like you're mechaser in the madrega of Lishma. So he felt sometimes when you praise the uniqueness of the Gadol, it's ka'ain giving yourself an excuse for not achieving that particular madrega. Okay, that's kind of a brisker chap, that even a beautiful hesped can sometimes be used as a bit of an excuse. Okay, so now let's look at Chaf. Chaf says, Kol Chacham, very interesting. This is taken from, again, Mishlei. Again, the Gra has many svarim, but the Even Shelaima, the source from which the Even Shelaima draws the most, is the Perish on Mishlei. And it says, Kol Chacham Eila Nishmasei B'chol Laila L'Mesifta Shel Maila L'Hasig Sham Ma She'i Efsher L'Hasig B'Hakitz V'Zeu Kol Tachlis Brias Hashena. So this is interesting. I think we discussed this briefly. People ask the question, why did God create sleep? Now, yes, given our body, we have to sleep, but Hashem could have created our body different, like robots don't have to sleep. In other words, what is the purpose of sleeping? Meaning, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create Shena? Why didn't he, think about it. Even if you don't sleep a lot, how many hours of your life? You're sleeping. It's a waste. Hashem could have, in other words, it's not a waste lamaisa, because I need it, but it's a waste that Hashem could have made us a different way. So the Gra gives an answer to this. The Gra's answer is that when your neshama separates from your guf in sleeping, your neshama goes up to Shemayim. And because it's no longer in your physical guf, just as the Gra said before, there are ruchnius ideas in Torah that your neshama couldn't really grasp when it's imprisoned in a guf. The neshama being liberated from the guf goes up to Shemayim and gets all sorts of understandings that it then can bring down to you. If there wouldn't be sleep, my neshama would be in my guf 24/7. I would never have an opportunity to be masik. Now, this is the idea that Hashem restores our neshama every day. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean our nefesh. In other words, we're not dead when we're asleep, right? So obviously there is a nefesh within us, but it means that the godly soul is oila, the neshama is oila l'mesifta jerakia. Mesifta jerakia means the heavenly yeshiva, where it absorbs all sorts of inyanim. Now we see this. This really explains why you go to sleep with a problem. It might be a kasha on Gemara. It might be even just a problem in life. And you wake up, and you often will have an answer. What happened? Because when the neshama gets liberated, the mind is faster, the mind is clearer. And that clarkat can even pertain in inyanim of Gashmias. Although he doesn't say that, but even in Gashmias, there's a certain clarity. So, again, maybe it's not appropriate to say a word from the Lubavitcher Rebbe when we learn the Gra, but okay, but I'll mention it because there actually is a connection. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says, he doesn't quote the Gra, but it fits with the Gra exactly. The minhag, and we were talking a few moments ago about staying up all night Shavuos night. Now, what is the makor of it? The actual makor of it is what the Beis Yosef did, but what's the svara for it? So it's brought down in the svarim that the night before Matan Torah, the Jewish people went to sleep, and they got up late. Hashem came to Har Sinai, and they weren't up yet, or at least many people weren't up yet. And they had to keep the Ribbon Shalom waiting. So in order to have an atonement for keeping Hashem waiting, we stay up the night before Matan Torah so that when Hashem comes in the morning to give us the Torah again, we're already up. That's why I tell people sometimes ask me, if they can't stay up all night, is it better to learn late and get up for a later minyan? Or is it better to go to sleep early and get up for the early minyan? L'chaira, the logic of the minhag is you should be up at the crack of dawn, meaning it would actually be better to go to sleep early and get up early rather than go to sleep late and get up late. Because the whole inyan is to be makdim the Ribono Shel Olam by coming early. So Fred Lubavitcher Rebbe, what type of business is this? If you're told that tomorrow morning Hashem is going to come, bring his Shekhinah to the world, and give you the Torah with Kolos Ubrakim, you would oversleep. Would you sleep at all? We'd be too excited or too scared or too frightened or too joyous, whatever the emotion would be. We couldn't sleep that night. How's it shaykh? And they oversleep? What's going on? So says the Rebbe, this was their cheshbon. They thought their sleep was a hachana for Kabbalah Satira. They wanted to purify themselves. They wanted to be holy. They wanted to remove themselves from materialism. And they thought that the kedusha that their neshama could obtain by sleeping might be higher than the kedusha they would obtain by being awake. And that was their havamina. Now that was a mistake, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to attain our kedusha by yigiyas HaTorah. In other words, sleep in a sense is a shortcut. You sleep, your neshama gets up there, gets all sorts of things, but that's the getter of a gift Hashem gives you. That doesn't come from your yigiyah, and therefore the ikar hatzlacha that a person has in ruchnius has to come from his yigiyas HaTorah. In fact, this is what they ask. When they ask Akasha, it's a pashut teretz. He says, why aren't you, you're obligated to stand up for a Talmud Chacham, right? Talmud Chacham, you gotta stand up. So, frek this person Akasha, you should stand up for every pregnant woman, because the baby, at least if it's a boy, maybe even if it's a girl, knows Kol HaTorah Kula. So if the baby knows, because a malach teaches the baby, if the baby knows Kol HaTorah Kula, I'm mechuyev to stand up. So I should stand up for every pregnant woman, every Jewish pregnant woman, at least. So one answer might be, hey, listen, the baby is in another room. It's like a different rishus. It's in the mother's womb. So I don't have to stand up for a Talmud Chacham who's in the next room there, right? That might be one teretz. But the other teretz is more pashut. The honor that we give to a Talmud Chacham is not because he has all this information in his head. What, am I going to honor a computer? Because, Ohr HaChachma has whatever it is, how many they have? 100,000 svarim in Ohr HaChachma. I'm going to stand up for a computer? Because it has all this information there? No. I stand up because the person through his yigiyah created a devekus b'Hashem. I stand up because of the yigiyah HaTorah. So yeah, the baby knows all the Torah. The baby knows more Torah than we know. But the baby didn't work for it. It was just given to the baby. So Memela, that's why there's no mitzvah to be machabed, the baby, the unborn baby, because all of the Torah that was learned. Right? So I remember I read about biography of my Rebbe Rav Kleski, that somebody came from Eretz Yisrael and told him this word, which is a good word, but the Rebbe was actually upset. He says, for that you have to go to Eretz Yisrael. He says, it's so pashut that way. He says, it's not even a chiddush. It is so obvious that the Kavod HaTorah we have is based on the yigiyah that somebody put in. And that is exactly why the baby has to lose it. Right? You may wonder, why doesn't Hashem let you have the head start? You learned the whole Torah before you were born. So you have to lose it? If I hit you on the lip, you lose it? Yeah, the answer is. It's good to be exposed to the Torah. That makes a roshan on your neshama. But now you have to learn it through yegiya and work and toil. What was given to you b'chinam is not really the chashivas of Torah. So sleep is a getter of a gift. Now they say that the Vilna Gaon sometimes, it's not clear because it almost contradicts what he says here, that malachim would come to him and offer to give him all sorts of explanations of things. And he turned it down. He says he only wanted those inyanim that came through Yegiya. Anything that was just a free thing, he bichlal did not want. There's another thing they say too, which is a different mahalach, that once there was a passage in the Tikkunei Zohar that the Gra had difficulty with, and in the middle of Shmona Esrei, he came up with 17 pshatim, which he remembered, but he was so bitzar, that it came to him during davening. He was mispalel to Hashem, that Hashem should take it away from him, that he should forget it, that he shouldn't remember it at all. And he forgot it. Hashem answered his tzaddik gozer. Hashem answered his tefillah. But then, of course, he was bitzar that he lost it, but he prayed that he would lose it. And then he was miyageya, and it all came back to him. And then he was besimcha again, because he got back the same thing, but it came through his yegiya b'Torah. And that was the most important thing.
The Rav said when the neshama goes up, it's able to receive certain spiritual matters. If this is the reality, would there not be an inyan for a person before they go to sleep to pray that their neshama will be able to receive as much? You want as much of that special spiritual chachma.
Yeah.
To say a special prayer. We don't see this.
It is kedai. It is brought down in Sfarim that one should try to fall asleep thinking of a Torah thought, thinking of divrei Torah, thinking about it doesn't necessarily have to be the hardest sugya that may keep you up, the hardest sugya that you're learning, but you think of divrei Torah, that gives a certain impetus or energy to your neshama. It's the fuel that gives your neshama the rocket fuel to come up there at a higher level and bring down Torah. In fact, Abraham Kanievsky would often say that he would have answers to shaylos and dreams. Now again, I'm not sure how this fits. I mean, would the Gra be mispalel? I mean, if he turned down the malachim, would he turn down the chaloimus? I'm not sure. On one hand, he seems to be saying there's a benefit you get. He's saying Hashem created sleep, so we would have those hasagas. Right? So I'm not sure. It seems to be a little inconsistent.
It's not his malachim.
So it's his chalam, it's from him. Okay, maybe it comes from his yegiya. His yegiya is kaveya, his chaloimus. So the Gra says that this is the tachlis of Shena. The tachlis of Shena is to liberate the neshama, from the guf, so it could be masik, it could comprehend in Shamayim what it could not comprehend bahakitz when he is awake. Okay. Of course, this could be a new excuse. A guy could say, he slept through morning seder. He said, listen, I wanted to achieve higher and higher levels. So you got to be careful not to abuse this. Okay. So now Chaf Aleph. Again, these are like short ideas. Ma shemechadesh al pi pashut, tzorech liyos mechuvan al pi said. Uchshemiskala lahachacham saydei satayra, az maven, shegam ma shechidesh v'yalduso al pi pashut, gam kein emes nachain, v'chol zman she'eno maven hasayd afilu hapshat eno boru b'yadai. This is actually a famous teaching of the Gra, in which we know there are different levels of Havana of the Torah. We'll just take there's pardes, pshat, remez, drash, sod. Let's just look at the lowest level and the highest level, right? So pshat is you want to learn pshat of something, whether it's a pasuk, whether it's a mishnah, whether it's a gemara, pshat of the gemara. But then everything has not just a machlokas. Let me explain something. When you have a machlokas Rashi and Tosfos, you're actually still learning on the level of pshat. In other words, pshat doesn't just mean one pshat. There may be 100 pshatim. Pshat is what is the text telling me? So Rashi says it's telling me this. Tosfos says it's telling me that. Ramban says it's telling me that. So all of our yeshivish are learning, with all of the mefarshim, is pshat. You're trying to figure out pshat. But there is a panemius hadvarim in everything, meaning everything also has a hidden esoteric meaning. An esoteric meaning in the Torah and even an esoteric meaning in Chazal. And this is obviously true in Agadata. In Agadata, that's very, very apparent, that the Agadatas are communicating sodos. But the Gra says, even in Yonim of Halacha, have sodos of Kabbalah that are in there. And ideally, most people never get to the sod. I mean, what is the sod of Shnai Mochsim B'Talas? We don't really know what the sod is. But the Gra says, in order for a pshat to be emes, it has to fit with the sodos of the Torah, which means we never know. That actually means we just never know. But he says, when the chacham reaches the level of sodos and panemius HaTorah, he will then be able to readjust the pshat lefi the emes of the sod. Now this is Yedua. The Gra actually says that you sometimes find many machloksim between the Gemara and the Zohar. And the poskim lay down a klal. Machlokas between Gemara and Zohar, we paskin like the Gemara. Of course, it's interesting. There's a catch-22 here, meaning the non-Mekubalim say you paskin like the Gemara, the Mekubalim say you paskin like the Zohar. So it's a little bit. So what do you do, right? Okay, that's a good question because it depends on who you ask. Okay, and if you're going to tell me, well, the paskin, you go with the poskim. Okay. The Mekubalim paskin, you go to Mekubalim, right? So you don't really have a criteria here, except following your Rebbe and following your Messiah. But be it as it may, it's a standard statement that there are machloksim between Zohar and Gemara. The Gra famously says, no such thing. If you think there is a conflict between the Zohar and the Gemara, you either do not understand the Gemara or you don't understand the Zohar. And again, this fits exactly, that's a well-known statement.
You understand both of them.
That's certainly possible. And that fits exactly what he's saying, because every emistika pshat has to fit with the panemius of the Torah. And if it doesn't fit with the panemius, it's actually not emes. So if the Gemara doesn't fit the sodos of the Zohar, then something's wrong, because every pshat has to be mechuvan al pi site. Now, as I say, for most of us, this is a teaching that there's not a lot we can do with. Again, that's okay. I'm learning Gemara, right? So someone's going to ask me, so I go through what I think pshat is. So your chavrusa is going to ask you, well, does this fit the sodos of the Torah? I mean, what are you going to answer? What am I going to answer? I have no idea. So lamaisa, you got to do the best that you can. Meaning, all we can try to do is try to come to emes. But the Gra actually says, until you know the panemius of Torah, you're not really sure. You're not really sure, because everything al pi pshat has to be mechuvan al pi sod, and this ties into what the Gra said, that there's no such thing as a machlokas between the Zohar and the Gemara, and that's based on this particular yesod. Now again, as I say, the standard language of the Paiskim is bedafka not that way. In other words, they always talk about machloksim between Zohar and Gemara, but the Gra was machadish that ali b'diyemes, there was no such machlokes. I mean, I said this a number of times, that as phenomenally great as the Gra was in Kol HaTorah Kula, he was greater in Kabbalah even than he was in Nigla, meaning the Gra was a Makubal. The Gra was an emistic Makubal. He wrote much more on Kabbalah, Tikkunei Zohar, etc., Sefer Yetzirah, than he wrote on non-Kabbalistic topics. The Gra was a Makubal. It's interesting, in the yeshiva world, we don't necessarily picture it that way. But Imamish was a Makubal.
Was he called a chassid?
He was called a chassid. Again, a little bit of a poetic thing. He put a cherem against chassidim, but he was called in his lifetime ha-chassid mi Vilna, Hagayin ha-chassid mi Vilna, and the like. What was his seder? It's interesting. It was funny. It was almost anticlimactic. His seder was, he finished. He had a seder. Obviously he learned all day, but his official seder was, he finished Bavli and Yerushalmi every month. Now, I have to admit, I was almost disappointed when I heard that. Every month, come on. He could have done it every hour, but whatever. But he learned other things too, so his Kabias was, he figured he would do Bavli and Yerushalmi every month, and that would be enough. And then he did other things, as well. And you see how much he learned Nach. We do have a number of, besides Mishlei, we have Perush Agra and many Sifrei. Megillas Esther is one. And in Megillas Esther, you actually see there's the Perush al Derech HaPshat, which most people who learn it learn. But then there's a Perush al Derech HaRemez, V'al Derech HaSod. Much smaller, much shorter. But yeah, he in the Gra in Perushim of Nach will often give Kabbalistic interpretations that Esther and Achashverosh are Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara, different in Yanim in which they're remuzim for other things and the like. So he was very Kabbalistic in all of his interpretations of Psukim and the like. Okay, so this is a point. He says, if you're not maven the site. Okay, this is very discouraging. Afilu apshat, eino borer biyadin. There was a rabbi who lived in Baltimore. This is before my time. He was nifter in the 1950s. But he was very, very close to my Rosh Hashiva Reb Ruderman. In fact, he was older than Reb Ruderman, and he was the one who encouraged Reb Ruderman to start a yeshiva in Baltimore. His name was Rav Farschlanger. So I knew, I knew when I was a young boy in yeshiva, I knew Elterer Bachrim who knew Rav Farschlanger. So there were people who knew him. And he was quite extraordinary. He was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer. He, at the age of 12, which is amazing, because Avnei Nezer's Talmidim were all much older. He came to Baltimore. People didn't realize what he was. He knew everything. He knew Kala Tarakula, Nigla, Nishner. He just knew everything. And he was like a part-time Rav of a part-time shul. He was learning with Balabatim who didn't know anything. He would read Gemara and Rashi with them, etc. He was a guy in Kala Tarakula. My Rosh Hashiva would say, when he first started in Eretz Yisrael, this is back in 1934, long time ago. So he had to collect a lot of money. And he stayed at Rav Farschlanger's house. But Rav Farschlanger never went to sleep and never ate anything. He was talking, learning the whole time. The Rosh Hashiva finally said, it was a guy, and he finally said, listen, I'm collecting money, I have to go to sleep. Rav Farschlanger said, what's the problem? It's only 4 in the morning, we didn't finish the sugi. He had to beg off, and the like. So this Rav Farschlanger was a gain otzim in everything. And Rosh Hashiva used to tell me that for the last 20 years of his life, his primary limud was Kabbalah. And he would tell Rav Ruderman, he says, you got to, Rav Ruderman was not into Kabbalah so much. He would tell Rav Ruderman, he says, you got to do Kabbalah. It's the mafteach, to everything. You'll understand Shas so much different when you do Kabbalah. But he says he was a person who knew, Shas, Poskim, Shulchan Aruch, everything. But most of his time was in Al Pisod to be able to understand.
Maybe Rav Ruderman said, Divrei Torah, Divrei Kabbalah, lo yalfi.
Very good. Yeah. But he would say that Rav Farschlanger had in his talus bag, he had Nefesh HaChaim and Tanya bound together. Because he said, B'Emerson is the same sefer. He held it was the same sefer. Different sprach, a different lashon a little bit. So Nefesh HaChaim was written for the Litvak, and Tanya was written for the Chassid. But he said the Yesodos of the two Svarim were the same. So he held them together. Interestingly, Lubavitcher Rebbe held the same way. Lubavitcher Rebbe used to quote Nefesh HaChaim. The Hasidim were very upset because Chabad normally doesn't quote non-Chabad. And somebody said, "Are you telling Hasidim to learn Nefesh HaChaim?" And they were saying it as if that's impossible. And the Rebbe said, "Wouldn't be so bad. Wouldn't be so bad to learn Nefesh HaChaim." Whatever. So there was the Hakarch. The Rebbe also was makir that Nefesh HaChaim has a lot of connections with Tanya. Okay, so that's the idea of Sod. Now, if you remember, the Gra said before, well, actually, it's after, but we learned it before. In Perek Yud Aleph, the Gra actually said, Geula cannot come, or Geula will only come in the Zechus of Penimia Satira. Remember that statement? That in the merit of learning Kabbalah, that will bring Geula. See, all of this fits. All of these statements come together. So what does that mean practically for us, right? Practically, are we going to, let's get rid of our Gemara Seder, learn Kabbalah? So, of course, it's already brought down in the time of the Rishonim that you're not really worthy to learn Kabbalah until you've mastered Shas and Poskim. You have to, the Lashon is Mamale Kresai. Your belly has to be full with Shas and Poskim. But still, Afilu Hachi, a certain taste of Kabbalah is something that is good for us. It's like something that gives us inspiration, that gives us chizuk. The Chazon Ish even said that one should try to read from the Zohar. Now there are Zohars like Masik Midvash that have, Hebrew, very easy Hebrew translation. It's not easy, but it's important to understand that 60% of the Zohar, maybe 70% of the Zohar, is not Sod Shebesod, meaning it can be understood at like a medrash, on a pshat level. See, it's interesting. We talk about 4 levels: pshat, remez, drash, sod. But it gets funny because each level has 4 levels. So in Sod, there's pshat of Sod, there is, remez of Sod, there's darash of Sod, and there's Sod of Sod. And it actually keeps on going down. So Memela, it's shayach for us, even though Sod Shebesod is beyond us, but Pshat Shebesod, we might have a shaychus to. So Memela said, we learn a little bit of Kabbalah, even today, on the level of what you might call Pshat Shebesod, right? Because even Sod has many different levels. And the Gra is telling us essentially that before Mashiach comes, that is something we need to be Isaac in. So that's why it's no accident. In the past decades, in mainstream yeshivas, there's much more learning of Chasidus, because Chasidus is essentially applied Kabbalah, meaning Hasidic literature is based on Kabbalah, whether it's Rav Tzadok, whether it's the Sfas Emes, it is based on, it takes Kabbalah and tries to communicate it in an easier way, but it's all gebayt on Kabbalah. And when I was in yeshiva, it wasn't that common. Now it's much more common. You'll see Tanyas all over the place. Not only in Or Sameach, you'll see Tanyas in Mir, in Chevron, and the like. Where is that coming from? The answer is, as we approach the Geula, there will be a greater need to be Isaac in these inyanim. The Gra himself said that, right? So Chasidus and the Gra are working together in that idea that there'll be a greater shaychus to inyanim of Kabbalah. Okay, so now let's go a little further, because after the Gra talked about how great Kabbalah is, he now makes a very important point. See, this is the important corrective point. Sif Chaf Beis. Mikaidem, tzarech lilmoid halachos. Your first learning has to be halacha. Now, by halacha, he doesn't mean halacha l'maisa. I mean, that's a separate issue. But when we learn Gemara, the regular sugyas we learn are called halachic sugyas. He's not referring to halacha l'maisa necessarily. That's a separate inyan. But your isek in the halachos, whether they're muktzah, whether they're maman hamutal b'safek, whatever you're learning, you're isek in the halachic inyanim, in addition to being makayim them, if it's shayach, and that is called lechem levav enosh yisad. Right? This should be a familiar pasuk to you. This is in Borchi Nafshi, Tehillim Kuf Dalid, which we of course recite on Rosh Chodesh. Some recite it every Shabbos Mincha, after Shabbos Mincha, whatever. But it says, bread satisfies the heart of man. So allegorically, bread is the halachos of Torah. Basic nutrition. The basic nutrition that your soul needs. Your soul food is the limud of inyanim of halacha. That's called lechem. V'achar kach. And after you've mastered the halachos, like Rav Farshlunger, yasaik bolimud hasaydais. You then want to penetrate to the inner meanings of Torah. Shenimshalu liyayin v'shemen. See, again, it's following the pasuk. Yayin yisamach levav enesh. Wine brings simcha to the heart of a person. What's lashon? And then it says shemen. Latzil panim mishamen, and the face shines from the oil. Right? People would sometimes put oil on their face, like a cologne or whatever it is that made their complexion shine. So you see, so the Gemara interprets it this way again, b'derech remes, that the lechem is your basic nutrition, and sodos are called the wine and the shemen. Now, wine and shemen add taste. Like wine makes you happy. Shemen also, you fry something, you cook something in it, it makes the food taste much better. But if you had to, you could survive on bread. You couldn't survive on wine and oil. So it's the wine and the oil, the treats a little bit, that are the sodos of the Torah, but your basic nutrition has to be the lechem. Right? That's how he's interpreting it. And therefore the Gra says, Mi shemahapecha seder lo yatzliach. If you try to learn the Kabbalah, the sodos, without mastering the halachos, you reverse the order, you're not going to be matzliach, meaning you won't know anything. You won't understand the sodos, and you don't know the halachos. Now, this is precisely the problem that exists today. We have organizations like the Kabbalah Center in Los Angeles, other places, where you have all sorts of people who are not shomer mitzvahs. They certainly don't learn Gemara, don't learn halacha, don't follow halacha, but they want mystical enlightenment. Sometimes they're mainly Jews, but a lot of goyim come. Hollywood actresses come because they want to be enlightened the same way you would go to a Buddhist thing. They go to the Kabbalah Center. The Gra is saying, if your Kabbalah is not rooted in the limud and the kiyum, both things, the learning and the fulfillment of the mitzvahs, you will not be able to connect to this at all. You will not have any hatzlacha in the enlightenment that the Kabbalah gives you. Now, as I indicated, though, even though we're not on the madrega where we've mastered the halachas, but a certain te'ima of Kabbalah is mutter for us because we're still in the category of people who want to learn halachas and want to be mekayim it. Masha'en kain, if you're a person who wants to skip that part. Now, if you think about this, this is a genuine conflict. I mean, I'm judging the kaf sechus because there are people who are very spiritual in the world. They have spiritual natiyas. And they don't understand the halachos of Yiddishkeit do not speak, they think, to their spiritual needs. In other words, they don't understand. You're telling me turning on a light is somehow, on Shabbos, is somehow a real bad thing. Ripping toilet paper. They don't see the kesher between all of these pratei maisim, minutiae, and spirituality. So they want to skip. Let's skip the Shulchan Aruch. Let's skip the Mishnah. Let's skip the Gemara. Let's go straight for the spirituality and the ruchnias. So one can understand this. In other words, one can understand where that's coming from, because they just don't see the ruchnias in all of these inyanim. In fact, we may not see it ourselves, and yet the Gra is saying The halachas have to be the foundation that allow the sod to enlighten you and elevate you. And without that foundation, you're not going to be matzliach. If you try to be mahapech b'seder and bypass the halachas, it's not going to work. Okay. Now he then says, let's do one more. Chaf Gimel. Agadais u'musar nitzrich lakael kakesef shenitzrich lianiyim v'liashim. Okay, we'll have to develop this a little bit more, but he shows in different places that when Shlomo HaMelech refers to silver, kesef, that's standard money, as opposed to zahav. Kesef and zahav. So he says, kesef is agada and musar. Zahav is like the advanced depth of halacha, meaning we're making a new distinction now. Until now, we've been differentiating between limud halacha and Kabbalah. Now, even within the nigla, now we're making a different differentiation. We're dealing with the non-Kabbalah. In a Gemara itself, right, you have, most of the Gemara is halachic discussion, but there's a lot of Agada. Now, Agada has mystical meanings, but there is a Pashut Pshat in Agada too. Many Balabatim might be incapable of mastering the complicated sugyas of halacha, so they learned Agadata. Remember, the Agadata of the Gemara is in a set of Svarim called Ein Yaakov. And in Europe, at least, an Ein Yaakov Yid was an expression. An Ein Yaakov Yid was a Yid who was not necessarily able to learn a complicated sugi in Gemara. He was a shoemaker or somebody, but he would learn Agadata. So the Vilna Gaon is mishabeach this. The Vilna Gaon is saying that just like everybody needs silver, even if you're a poor guy, you have to have silver coins to buy food. So gold, only rich people had gold coins, because gold coins were worth much more. So he says the advanced limud of halacha is called zav. Kesef is agada and musar, and everybody needs agada and musar, just like silver, that is needed for basic purchases, both by aniyim and by ashirim. So too, in Torah, those who are rich in das get the gold of halachic learning, detailed halachic learning. Those who are poorer in das should focus on the silver of agados umusar. Okay, so this is not a Kabbalah thing anymore. This is simply differentiating the notion that everybody has a chelik in Torah, but it's not the same chelik in Torah. In Torah, there is something that even if you're poor in wisdom, you can connect to, and there are things in Torah for people who are richer in wisdom that they connect to. Okay, we'll stop here.